Welcome to another Apollo Papyrus podcast episode. I am Aaron Apollo Camp. For this episode, my interview guest is an author and filmmaker. As an author, he has written the novel God Rest Ye Merry Gentlemen and the short stories The Darkness Rolled Over Her, Kindling, and Ciao Bella. His name is Paul Andrew Skidmore, and my interview with Paul will follow the note-taking sounds. Paul Skidmore, welcome to the Apollo Papyrus podcast.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Feel free to introduce yourself to our listeners.
I am Paul Skidmore. I'm an author and filmmaker in Tennessee, and I've written 3 short stories and a novel. One of those short stories is called The Darkness Rolled Over Her, which I've made into a feature film, which is nearing completion and will be released as soon as possible.
We're going to focus a little more on the darkness rolled over her in some of the later questions of this interview, but you've also written a novel and it's titled God Rest Ye Merry Gentlemen. Without spoiling too much about your novel, what is that about?
Yeah, it's a Cold War Christmas story, and it is based around the true story that some people are familiar with, the origins of how NORAD tracks Santa every year. So some of your listeners may be familiar with, NORAD, the sort of nuclear missile tracking program that tracks all the nuclear activity in the world. They track Santa every year at Christmas time, and that began back in 1955 when Sears had a Santa hotline where you could call and tell Santa what you wanted for Christmas, and they misprinted the number in the paper, in the Colorado Springs paper, and the number that they put in just happened to be the number for essentially the red phone inside what would become NORAD. At that time, it was called Continental Air Defense, and so it was the phone number for Colonel Harry Shoup's desk at Continental Air Defense. And so this phone rings, and he, the only people that have that number are the president and General Curtis LeMay, and it's a little boy with his Christmas list. And so it takes them a little bit to figure out, what has happened, but then they eventually embrace it, and they embrace it sort of as a PR campaign over the years. But I just sort of love the origin story of that. And I always thought, while the phones are all messed up, especially in 1955, and that's the primary form of communication, we didn't have satellites or anything like that yet. Sputnik had just been, I think, was just released, or maybe it was another couple of years before Sputnik was in the air. But so phones were a big, the main method of communication. And I just thought, man, while all the phones were screwed up, that would be the prime time for the Soviets to attack if they knew what was going on, or if this was perhaps somehow planned by them. And so my story sort of explores those ideas. It follows the main character, David Mitchell, who's just sort of a Bible thumping airman from Kentucky, and he's feeling out of place in the military, meeting all these different people from all these different places with all these different worldviews, and having to work together with them. And they all have to pull together when the red phone rings and the alarms go off on Christmas Eve, 1955. It's a Christmas story. It's does a little bit with Cold War, does a little bit with sort of the personal piece that we all, I think, struggle with. And I don't know, I think it's pretty fun. And I'd love to make it as my next film. So that's the God Rest Ye Merry Gentlemen.
Is God Rest Ye Merry Gentlemen independently, traditionally, or hybrid published?
It is completely independently published. I say completely. I don't actually print the books myself, but that's pretty much the only part of the process that I did not do. On my short stories, I had a friend who was an editor, and she graciously edited those just as my friend. I would go over and we'd fix dinner, and she'd go over them, and she was really gracious to do that because she charges other people a good price to do that. I did not have her edit this one. That may be evident in some places, but I wrote it. I did all the research myself. I visited Colorado Springs a couple times. I talked to some people that were familiar with a little bit of the subject matter, either from the Air Force or from that time period in Colorado Springs, and wrote it myself, pretty much all on my iPad and Scrivener, and then brought it over into Scrivener for desktop to do to finalize all the formatting. If you buy the book on Amazon, the guts of that book, that's the camera ready PDF that I made myself in Scrivener. If you get the ebook, that is the EPUB file that I made myself in Scrivener. So basically, the end distribution on Amazon or Apple Books, that's really the only part that that I haven't done myself.
One of your short stories is titled The Darkness Rolled Over Her. Without spoiling too much about that particular short story, what is it about?
The main character, Gwen, is a 40-ish woman, female veteran, and she has decided to take her own life. You find that on the first sentences of the book. And she's got this trip that's been planned previously, so she decides, okay, I'll go on that, and this will be my time to kind of say goodbye to some people that she knows. They don't know what she's got planned. And the trip is a fly fishing retreat, and she gets paired up with this old fly fisherman named Roy. And her experience with him and their conversation throughout the day starts to challenge the decision that she's made a little bit. And there's another younger woman on the trip as well. She's in her 20s. Her name is Sam. And Gwen looks at Sam and thinks, that's kind of where I was when I was her age. And I don't want her to be where I am at my age, but I don't know what to do about that. And so that starts to challenge her thinking as well, and her decision also. And so the story of Gwen is sort of the tension between those three things: the decision she's made, the encouragement and sort of mentorship that she's getting from Roy, and her desire to reach out and help this younger woman, Sam. And it's a short story. It's just the paperback's just 72 pages. You can read it in one sitting. It reads like a movie, which is one reason I made it into a movie. But it is an exploration, not just about the self-harm or something like that, but it is also just about the depression and loneliness and purposelessness that we all feel, and ways that we can hopefully find to come out of that.
What motivated you to write a short story about suicide and suicidal ideation?
Well, after I wrote my first short story, Kindling, I published it as an ebook. And despite being a filmmaker my whole life, and everybody knows me as that, they were very surprised that I had written something. They're like, "Oh, I didn't know you were a writer." I was like, "Well, I mean, I'm a filmmaker. Like, where do you think the stuff that I film comes from? You have to write it first, you know." But they just don't think about that. They only look at the final screen product. But they were all excited about the ebook, but a lot of people wanted a paperback. And at that time, this was I think May of 2018, I think, and it just it didn't seem financially feasible to me to put out a 36-page short story in paperback, because what I was going to have to charge for it to make any money off of it just didn't seem like people would buy it. So I thought, well, what I can do is I can just accumulate a bunch of short stories and put them together in sort of an anthology and just sell one big paperback. And so Ciao Bella, which is another one of my short stories, that was one of the stories that I wrote down. God Rest You Merry Gentlemen actually was supposed to be one of those short stories, but then it was a long story. It ended up being over, it was like 44,000 words by the time I got done with it. So it was no longer a short story at that point. Sort of accidentally wrote my first novel, which not many people can say. And The Darkness Rolled Over Her was one of those stories as well. And when I first started writing it, my dad is a fly fisherman, and he helped guide a group similar to what the situation is in the book. Roy is not really based on my dad; they're not parallel people necessarily, but I just sort of drew inspiration from what I had learned from my dad when he had taken me fly fishing. And one thing that I remembered was, as a little kid, Dad would go fly fishing, but he would give me a can of corn and a rod and reel or maybe some worms, and he'd sit me on a big rock, and he would just sort of have me sit there sort of for hours with my lure in the water, maybe potentially catching something. Now as an adult, I look back on that and think, maybe he was just sort of keeping me out of keeping me out of his way for a few hours. But when he began to teach me fly fishing, it's very different. You're in the water and you are constantly moving. So Dad will try a little spot, and after about 30 seconds or a minute, if he hadn't gotten a bite, he's moving on. He's going on upriver. In fact, some of his fishing buddies get onto him because they want to kind of hang out for a couple of minutes. And Dad's like, "What's the point? If they're not biting, they're not going to get it. You're just wasting time. You're just standing in the water. So let's just keep moving." And so I thought about that idea of keep moving, of constant movement. And one of the ideas that came into my mind with that was when I've heard people say about maybe an elderly person that has a fall or gets sick. Sometimes you'll hear people say, "Yeah, once you stop moving, it's over." Um, and and so I had sort of these two contrasting ideas in my head, and I thought, okay, well, here I've got this great fishing setting, and it's really ripe for sort of a parable. But what is the story here? I need somebody who needs to learn to keep moving. So I need somebody who has decided to stop moving. I need someone who's decided to give up, someone who's decided to just lay down in the water. If you lay down in the water in the Tellico River or the North River out in East Tennessee, that ice cold water will, I mean, you'll die, and not it won't take too long. You've got to stand up and you got to keep moving. You got to keep pushing against the water that's coming down on you. And so at that point, it became about someone who wasn't just, sad or depressed, but somebody who had decided to stop, someone who had decided to let go of everything. And at that point, I realized what I was writing wasn't just sort of a cute parable anymore, but actually was something very serious and very important. And I started doing some research. And I also had a couple of friends during the time that I was working on the first draft who ended their life. And I saw my friends and the grief that they had around that and realized this is an extremely important thing. At first, I was a little discouraged because I felt like, you know, it was trying to empty the ocean with a thimble, but um, but then I thought, this is just important, and even if it just helps, a handful of people, I think this is worth doing. And so I have in my life some people that have experience with suicide firsthand. Um, I myself am not what I would classically call suicidal. I've experienced depression. I've experienced loneliness and sort of worthlessness. I think many of us, probably all of us, have felt that to some degree. And so I tried to kind of turn up the volume on that a little bit to get to where this character is. Um, but I have people in my life that were able to help me understand what is different about being all the way to that place than just being near that place. I've had days that I woke up and thought, hey, if this is how my life is going to go for the rest of my life, I don't much like this. I would be happy if this didn't last much longer. But I was not somebody who made plans or something like that. I have two friends that have attempted and lived, thank God. But they were able to share firsthand. They were very gracious in reading an early draft and sharing their thoughts and their feedback with me, and it was very helpful. I have another friend who lost her father to suicide, and she was able to talk to me about, growing up with him and experiencing it before and after, and the grief and the feelings that she's had after he was gone. And I have another friend who is a counselor and has counseled many people through suicidal times and was able to give me a lot of great feedback, particularly about um, healthy ways of interacting. And so some of the other characters in the story, Roy, Mrs. Hittlemeyer, a few others, you will see interacting with Gwen in a way that is modeling some healthy behaviors. Because I wrote this book for two groups of people. I wrote it for people who are feeling these kinds of feelings and feeling worthless and feeling depressed and feeling lonely and feeling left out or feeling like a burden. But I've also written it for people who are family and friends of people in that space so that they could understand what that person is going through, but also maybe some good and healthy things to say and responses to to their time together. And so getting that feedback from my friends was just invaluable. And so I worked that into the subsequent drafts and the final draft, and they were all very pleased with how it turned out and really excited that it's becoming a film. The film is basically one to one off the page. I had to make a couple of changes just because prose does not always translate individual easily, but the film is very similar to the book, and the dialogue of the film is pretty much one to one off the page of the book. And so I'm excited for even more people to be exposed to this story and to be able to have a chance to experience it, not just themselves, but with their friends and with their family, to either say, "Hey, this is what I'm going through," or to say to someone who is in darkness, um, you know, "Hi, I want to encourage you. I want to spend time with you, and I want to help you keep moving."
The ebook version of The Darkness Ruled Over Her is available for free, and I have a link that I'll include in the text description of the episode once it's uploaded for where the free version can be found. Why did you decide to make the ebook version available for free?
Yeah, so I'll give the real reason, and then I'll also give the business reason, because I know we have a lot of other authors and writing community people listening. I think that would be helpful. The real reason is because of the subject matter. I just wanted everyone to have access to this story. Um, in business they tell you if you don't put a price on it, that you sort of communicate that it doesn't have value. And so I sort of thought about that and weighed that. But I just imagined, some high school kid in this space and discovering the story, but not being able to get to it because it was 99 cents and he had to have his parents' credit card or something. You know what I mean? And so I just thought if it's free, as long as they got an email address, then like they can get the story. And so I really wanted to make it for free because I just really wanted to lower the barrier of access. And beyond that, we created this mini book club around the short story called Five Coffees and a Book. And the idea is that over 5 weeks, you would sit with a couple of friends, you'd read the books in the beginning, and then over 5 weeks, you would talk about the book and the themes of the book, the characters of the book, and there's a whole discussion guide that makes it very easy. And I'm giving that away for free too because the experience of a group like this is so good. I just really want people to have it, and I want them to have it for free, for gratis. The ebook is free, will always be free. The discussion guide is free, will always be free. And I'd love to give away, 100,000 copies of the ebook. We're well shy of that now, but there have been a lot of people that have signed up and gotten the book, and a handful of people that have done the Five Coffees in a Book experience. Everyone who's done Five Coffees in a Book is really, really, really pleased with the experience, the time. You make friends for life. I mean, you just open up a level of friendship with people that you may even think you already know really well, but it just opens up a level of friendship that maybe you didn't even know you could have in today's age. I think it's really important in this sort of digitally connected world. It's like the world has never been more connected than it is now, but also somehow we're all more isolated than we've ever been. And so I just thought this would be a good way to just get people sitting at a table and talking face to face and opening up and checking in on each other and loving and encouraging each other. And so, as a business person, I give away the PDF for free. Everyone should have what they call a lead generating PDF. So to get the ebook, you put in your email address, and then, I have you now on my mailing list. Now, my mailing list, I don't send out a ton of emails on that. I haven't manually sent out an email on that mailing list in probably a couple of years. There's a few automated emails right when you sign up for the book that give you the download link for the book and then ask you to share it with somebody and to review it and those kinds of things. But other than those, like I think it's like three automated emails kind of up front, I haven't sent out an email on that list in a long time. But when the movie is ready, I'll be able to email those people and let them know, the film is ready and that sort of thing. And they can opt out of the email list right away. They can get the book and immediately opt out of the email list. That's fine. Very few people have done that. People want to know about the future things happening with this book or with this Five Coffees in a Book or with a movie. So for me, from a business perspective, giving it away for free was a way to, capture email addresses and start building an email list. Because the truth of the matter is, your email list is kind of the only thing you can own. You might have 1 million followers on Instagram, and if Instagram shuts your account down, then you have zero. Those followers don't belong to you; they belong to Instagram. You can have 100,000 followers on X, but if X, suspends your account for some reason, then you have zero followers because those followers don't belong to you. They belong to X. But when you have their email, then those emails belong to you. That list belongs to you, and you can take it from platform to platform. You can export it, from Mailchimp and import it into Substack or whatever. There's some legal ramifications there that you have to be aware of, but technically you're able to do that. And so if you hold in your hand the email addresses of people who have opted in, then that's something that you own, and that's more valuable than money in a lot of cases, because those are the people you're going to email. That's where you're going to find your 1,000 true friends, your 1,000 true fans, people who are going to buy everything that you put out, read all of your books, um, buy the t-shirt, buy the coffee mug. So I have plenty of things for sale. My other books are for sale. The movie is going to be for sale. I have, based on The Darkness Rolled Over, I have t-shirts, coffee mugs, stickers, magnets, all those kinds of things. If you want to buy the paperback, the paperback is for sale. I will take your money. I will happily take as much money as you would like to give me. But this story in particular, I thought I really want to make this for free. And it just so happens it also serves a business purpose as well.
There is a film adaptation of the Darkness Rolled Over currently in the works. What was production like for the film?
Oh yeah, great question. So it's 2020. It's very beginning of the pandemic. Half the world is shut down. And of course, one of the first things to dry up is freelance film and video work. Nobody wants to be crammed into a room with a bunch of strangers. So there was not much work for me to do. And the one job that I did get during that time was some medical training videos, because the medical training place, they couldn't do any training. So they're like, well, we're going to redo all of our training materials. So me and my buddy Noah, who helps me with all my film stuff, we went and filmed that. And uh, we were coming back at the end of one of those things. We're sitting in my living room. This was August 17th of 2020. Okay. So August 17th, 2020, we're sitting in my living room, and I say to Noah, the short story, there's not but like 4 or 5 characters in it. It's all exterior day. It's all present day. There's no exploding helicopters. There's no period costumes or anything weird like that. It's all like, I think we could easily make this as a movie. I've got a camera, I've got microphones, I've got lights for a couple of the nighttime things. I've got pretty much everything that we need to do it. I've put a budget together to do it out in East Tennessee where I'd like to do it, but there's no cell service out there. It's pretty remote. We'd have to basically move out there for 2-3 weeks, which means that we would have to be paying everybody, and I just I just don't think I can raise that money right now. And I said, if we could find somewhere around here that could work as the river. And the one thing I said to him was, the one place we're not shooting it definitely is in Stones River. So here in Murfreesboro, where I live, we have Stones River. It kind of runs through town. And there's some pretty spots, but it's basically like it's right in the middle of town, and there's a greenway that goes by it. There's always people jogging or riding their bicycles and stuff. It's very kind of an urban place. And the story is set like up in the mountains, like remote. And I said, the one, and it's kind of flat, and I don't know, sometimes in some places the water seems like maybe it's a little nasty. So it's just like, we're just not shooting it in the Stones River. That's the one place that we're not doing it. I said, but if there were a river around here where we could do it. And he said, well, I think I know a place, next county over. And so we left right then and went to go look at it. And I decided, okay, I think this will work. And so if this works, then we can do it on evenings and weekends whenever people have free. And I also told him, I said, from these medical training videos, one of the ladies here, her name was Carrie Caradoff. I said, I think she would be perfect for Gwen. She's the right age. She's the right look. She's very naturalistic in her performance. I think she would be good for Gwen. So I reached out to her. She was really excited about the character. She said, and I know the perfect person to play Roy. And so her friend Phil Mote came in to play Roy, and I kind of borrowed on their friendship as needed in the film. And they have great chemistry together. They're really fantastic on screen together. So anyway, that first discussion with Noah was August 17th. Hey, can we do this? And then September 16th, 2020, less than a month later, less than a calendar month later, was our first day of production. So we we got a feature film from I think we can make a movie to first day of production in 30 days. It was insane. I'd never done anything like that in my life. And it was basically just me and Noah and the cast. We got all the cast during that time pretty much. We got most of our locations during that time. I went to two gentlemen that I knew to get the money, and we got the money, we got new equipment, we got all the wardrobe and set dressing and everything. We got some food and some sponsorship stuff during that time. I just can't believe how much we were able to do in that 29, 30 days. And we went to that location in the next county and we shot that first day. And that location was so rough to shoot in. It was beautiful, but it was so rough to get in and out of. We decided we were never going back. And we ended up shooting the rest of the film in the Stones River here in Murfreesboro. Because at that point we were already making the movie. I was like, well, we already spent this money. Like we're making the movie. We got to do something. And thankfully, providentially, we were able to find some really beautiful sections of the Stones River. You would never know they're not out in the middle of the mountains somewhere. It's crazy how close to town we are in a lot of the shots in the film because the film just feels like it's out in the middle of nowhere. And so production most days we shot 18 days over a month and a half. Our crew, most of that time, was three people: me, Noah, and a young lady named Caitlin, who was our production assistant. And so it was basically me and Noah doing a lot of the actual technical work, and Caitlin was assisting with things where she could or running errands for us. And then our cast, of course, was small. A third of the movie is just Roy and Gwen out on the water fishing. And so many days it was just the five of us out in the water making the film. It was wonderful. It was exciting. It was really exhilarating to make something that great with that small a crew, that small a production. I don't ever want to do it again. I don't. Even in film school, like we had 30 people in our crew. And so I look forward to making God Rest You Merry Gentlemen with a nice, big, healthy, well-fed, well-paid crew. But making this was truly a labor of love. I don't think I would have done it if it hadn't been a subject matter that I cared about and that I thought would honestly save someone's life. I do honestly believe someone is going to come in contact with this book or this film, and because of that, someone who is going to end their life will not. I honestly believe that, and that's why I'm working so hard on it. I do hope that the film makes money. That would be great. But more than that, I hope that it changes the course of someone's life because you just never know. To sort of continue the fishing analogy, the water analogies, you never know the ripples, how far they're going to go before when you do something that has an impact like this.
I only have time for a couple more questions, and I only have several minutes left in this interview. But you've written a couple of other short stories, Kindling and Ciao Bella. Without spoiling too much about those two short stories, what are each of them about?
Sure. So Ciao Bella is only 16 pages. It's super short. I also have an audiobook of that available. You can find that on my site, parabolas.com. Um, it is about the time, it's a mostly true story of the time that I went to Italy and met the most beautiful woman that I'd ever seen. It's probably written in the style, if you like David Sedaris, memoir, essay kind of stuff, then you would probably like it. It's funny and introspective and first person. And like I said, it's 99% true. Um, Kindling was the first short story that I wrote, and prose wise, like the actual writing wise, is probably the one that I like the most still. It was a story that I'd had in my head for probably about 10 years, but I could never figure out how to make it as a film. And so when I decided to try short stories, I thought, okay, well, I'll start with this story that is also, basically 75% baked already. And it's about Arthur. He wakes up after having had a fight with his wife, Annie, the night before. He wakes up to find that she's left the house to go stay with her mom. And so he just decides, well, he's going to do what he wants that day. And in the course of doing that, he ends up injured and trapped and hunted by a deadly beast out in the woods. And it's I love it. I would love to make it as a little short film if there were ever some market for it, or maybe incorporate some of the scenes into another film one day. But it's a really lovely story. I also did an audiobook of that, which you can find at parabolas.com. And it is, again, fully produced by me. I recorded it myself. I got the music and the sound effects and things. It's sort of highly produced, but it's a lot of fun. Ciao Bella is the same. I recorded it myself. And it's kind of highly produced, but it's a lot of fun to listen to. Kindling is on Audible, but Ciao Bella is not. It's on my Gumroad, but you can find the link on parabolas.com. And the Darkness Rolled Over Her and the discussion guide for that are available at fivecoffeesinabook.com, where you can get both of those things for free.
One final question for this interview. How do you approach writing a novel and writing a short story differently?
Mm, mm, mm. So let me talk about it first as a filmmaker, because that's my main background, And one thing that we learned was we had to do short films in school because you have a limited amount of time to film and you have a limited amount of crew and resources and money and that sort of thing. And the temptation is to think, oh, well, a short film will be easier because there's less of it. But actually, that is not the case at all. I think short films are much harder. It's sort of like the old joke, I would have written you a shorter letter, but I didn't have time. It takes time and effort to really distill something down to its essence, to really distill something down to its most important properties. And in the same way, that's how a short story is different from a novel. A novel can be about several things, and you can have multiple plot lines going on in a novel, and you can have multiple character arcs, and you can kind of bounce back and forth, and you can keep the reader's engagement with that, and readers like that. But in a short story, you don't really have time for that. It needs to sort of be about one thing, and it needs to be so wholeheartedly about that one thing. And so it is more difficult in that way because I think a lot of, especially those of us who are writers, you can probably tell by my talking and my talking on and on. I'm a writer, not an editor. And so a lot of us who are writers like to produce words, and it's much harder to sort of take them away. But you just kind of have to approach it like, again, another old joke about how do you carve a statue of an elephant. You start with a big block of marble and you cut away everything that doesn't look like an elephant. And with a short story, you just have to decide, okay, this short story is about regret, or this short story is about peace, or this short story is about encouragement. And then you just, even if they're great ideas, sometimes you have to say, well, I'll just have to save that for another story because that's a great idea, but it just really doesn't fit with my theme that I'm really trying to keep everything tied to. And that to me is the biggest challenge of writing something short over something broader like a novel. With a novel, you have room to kind of roam around and explore things and just sort of savor things. But a short story's got to be really distilled and compact. And it is not just a shorter novel, it is a different medium. A short story is a different medium than a novel. And I find it challenging, but I love it. Not just for my attention span, but like I said, Kindling, there's very little that I would go back and change about it. I just think the writing is very tight, and the information that you get per page is so good. And my writing style, I was really happy with it when I got done with it. And it makes for a good audiobook too, but to just sit and read it on your own, I think is really a treat. And I don't think it would be as enjoyable a story if it were novel length.
Paul, thank you for appearing on the Apollo Papyrus podcast. You were a wonderful guest.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you so much for having me. It was a delight to be here.
I'll put a link to the 5 coffees and a book discussion guide in the text description of this episode. This is Aaron Apollo Camp reminding y'all to find your writing and reading purpose. Bye for now. Copyright 2025, Aaron Apollo Camp, all rights reserved. This podcast episode is intended for the private listening of our audience. Any reuse or retransmission of this podcast episode without the express written consent of the podcast host is prohibited except under fair use guidelines. Royalty-free music and sound effects obtained from https://www.zapsplat.com.